may have seen previous videos. I built a composite prime deck over here with a new substructure, and it's great storage. Underneath we've got loads of timber, all sorts of building materials tucked away, but we keep losing footballs underneath and it looks a bit of a mess. So I'm going to clad this whole end sort of elevation with the same material I've used elsewhere. You may have seen me build fences. So I'm using treated, they're called Slater's laths. They're 50 by 25 in terms of their sort of size, and I've got 4.8 and 3.6 metre long sections. And my first job is to make sure I've got a sort of uniform face to fix to. So as you can see, there's lots of different sort of bits of sort of joists sticking out, different sort of levels and things. So I'm going to attach new pieces of timber to the front so that across the front face I can fix these slats nice and neat, all on the same sort of vertical alignment. So, and I'm going to design in some little gate type doors as well to provide access. I've got all my vertical sort of posts in, they're all bang on level, nice and plumb. So I can now clad across here with my 50 by 25 mil treated Slater's lat. So the top one, I'm also going to use it to hide these clippings. Obviously my furthest board out on the edge needed the clips to hold it in place, but that doesn't look very neat. So my first one I'm going to fit sort of flush with the top edge of the deck, and then I can fit another one just over the top, and that neatly hides all those fixings and gives it a really neat clear edge. If you've seen my fencing videos, when I'm installing these slats I want a uniform gap between them, so all I use is some bits of MDF. These are 9mm MDF bits. I have a little screw in them, and basically I'll start at the bottom, and as you work your way up, well, you don't need to start at the bottom, but you need one underneath. You simply slot that in between them and it gives you a uniform gap. So I've got 3 of those that I'll space along the full length, and that'll give me a uniform gap. I'm just using standard annular ring shank nails. These are 40mm long. Hammer them in and then use a little punch just to make sure they're nicely seated and not too visible on the surface. Key thing as ever is using your spirit level, make sure everything's nice and level, nice and sort of plumb. So I've just put in the door frame, so I'm going to make a little door in here. So the key thing here is making sure the frame is bob on straight and vertical. So you want to make sure it's vertical in terms of how it faces the deck, and you need to make sure all these verticals are all aligned so your slats go across without any sort of strange bowing or weaving or anything. And critically, you want to make sure this one here is bob on level vertically, because hanging doors on wonky posts just makes it really difficult. So I've just been using some old treated timbers that I had knocking about to make all this, but as you can see it's all bob on level, so when I get to build and design the door it will fit a lot easier than if it was wonky. I've also had to just do things like chipping away concrete footings and things to make space for the slats. So I've got the door frames in, they're perfectly plumb and straight, good and secure. And now I'm just fixing some more vertical posts to secure the slats. So just key thing again is making sure they're all level. So I'm just fixing one screw at the top so they still move about, then checking it with a spirit level, make sure it's all level vertically before putting in some more fixings. And I'm just using, on these shorter ones, just long screws, and on the bigger ones that are taking a bit more sort of load, sort of coach screws. And there we go, all the vertical posts on this side are in. Obviously on the steps you need more frequent vertical posts because you don't want the slats being unsupported. Okay, so I'm now making the door, the gate panel, to go in here. This will hinge out this way. So what I'm using are these 50 by 25, same as these, Slater's lats. And I'm going to have them on the inside of here, on either side. They're going to be the verticals that are holding everything together. And then going across them is going to be the slats at the same spacing as these. And I've deliberately made it so the door is going to be raised up, so it's the same gap there, 9mm down, and there'll be plenty of space at the bottom for clearance, so I'm not catching the gravel. And this one I'm deliberately making these slightly longer so that they will hit this post. That'll not stop it swinging inwards. So it's just about a centimetre over, still leaving enough space to nail in the rest of the battens as they come across. And then I've been looking at different hinge options, and I've got some of these big old sort of stainless steel sort of flap hinges. I'm going to use these. So this one will be mounted on inside here, and then I'm actually going to clamp it between the vertical and the horizontal, so it'll be trapped in there. And what I'll do is I'll get this where I want it, and then I'll drill through so I know where my screws need to go. Then I will line it up so the screw holes match the spacing of these horizontals. So I'll screw through from the back then, so you won't see any fixings in the front. And in effect that sort of flap of the hinge will be locked in between there. There'll be one there and there'll be one there. And these are good solid external hinges. So we'll have two of those. And I think it's going to be about 11 slats. So it'll be a fairly heavy door. Yeah, that should work, so I'll show you how we get on. So in terms of this sort of door frame I'm making, this is the top slat going horizontally. That's just temporarily fixed for a minute, but in terms of getting your post vertical, I've got a great big triangle here, one of the great big ones that you open out, but I can check it as it gets bigger. But just to get the first one in the right sort of position, I'm just using one of these little angles, offer it up to there, make sure it's nice and firm, and then making sure this is bang on square, and then I'll fix 2 screws in there. So this first one's fixed, I'm pretty sure it's square. I'm also going to rebate my hinge. I'm going to rebate this into the vertical. I'm going to cut this out where the hinge goes, so these front ones that go across here haven't got the extra depth of the hinge, so I'm going to rebate that with a chisel. Okay, so now here's my hinge. Offer your hinge up. I've positioned it so I've got my 9cm gaps on either side of the timbers, and then making sure that the screw holes for the hinge aren't in that gap, so they've got to penetrate the wood. And now I'm just going to use a Stanley knife to I'll hammer it in, go around this edge, make sure I've got a neat clean cut, and then just sharpen the chisel, and I shall just chisel this out to the depths of it's like 3 or 4 mil for that. So just line up your Stanley knife. Then that gives a nice, neat, clean edge. And I'll do that down there. But before I assemble this, I will coat that with preservative. I'll slap some on there. That now sits beautifully flush in that one. So then I can screw through from the back into the slats that go that way. And I'll work my way down and then work out where the next hinge goes. So that I can find where to go. Drill through here. It's always a good idea anyway to drill a hole in your one bit of wood and let the screw bite the other one and pull it together. That's a bit risky there, making sure I don't hit my deck underneath. But, so now I can fix the wood, well, just flip it over and get the wood in the right place and then screw it through from behind. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to use my big triangle to make sure everything is remaining nice and square. So I've got my 9cm piece. I'm just using simple spring clamps just to clamp it together. So that I can then flip it over. I'm going to put it up on my table, a bench over there, and then I can screw through here. Like I say, one of the key things is just keep making sure everything's nice and square. Just checking everything's looking good and square as you're working around, because the more fixings you put in, obviously the harder it is to adjust it. So it's coming on. And now I've got the hinge, more complicated hinge ones in. It's just a case of getting your next slat, putting in your 9mm spacers, squeezing it up nice and tight, making sure they're level at the ends. And then I'm just doing a pilot hole through the top one. And then sticking a screw in. Obviously make sure your screws are the right length so they don't stick out the front. And then pick them up and then move your little spacers. Get your next one, choose your front face, put it on the outside because it's the outside of the gate that's your front. Now that seems very thin. It's a thinner bit of wood for something. Oh yeah, tapering bit of wood, so I'll discard that one. Pick a nice face. Again, line it up. Line up the ends. Squeeze it against your 9mm. And then same process. So there we go, there's, so just re-hung the hinges. And that's it sort of in position. So it's fits pretty snugly there. Sort of pretty much perfectly fits in. You know, I left it a bit longer on this edge so that that acts as a slam plate onto that post, and there's still space on the post to attach the next row of battens. And then on this side, here are the hinges, which will be that way around, and I will just rebate them in there. That'll give me a few more mils so that it doesn't catch on that side and it'll fit perfectly flush. Now I'm just going to sort of rebate into the post the hinges, the bits that aren't attached to the door. You could use the same as I did before, which was a Stanley knife and a chisel. But in this instance, I'm going to just cheat and use my multi-tool. It's a bit more tricky to access here, so I'm just going to use my multi-tool just to cut out about a 4mm deep space for the hinge to sit in nice and flush. And then before I fix it all together, I will just put some more sort of wood treatment into the cut wood, just to make sure it's good and sort of protected. Okay, so they're now cut out, just treat them, screw it in. I'm using sort of, what are they, 3 or 4 inch sort of screws, 4 of them, top and bottom. Should be more than enough to hold the weight of this door. Following my build, I just noticed something a second ago. The hinges I'd fixed in here, like this, when I offered it up to the door, suddenly realised there's like a 5mm sort of gap. And it meant the door didn't quite fit right. So what I realised, I put the hinges on the wrong way around. So it's easy to dismantle the way it's been fixed. So this is the way it's meant to be. So it's laid flat against this vertical, so that is laid flat against that vertical. I'll show you when I install it. But yeah, I'm just flipping the hinges around. Obviously the holes, I'm having to re-drill the holes a slightly different position this way around. So there we go. Okay, so the door is made. Here we go, here's our little door. So I'll carry on the timbers at the 9mm spacing going across. But there it is. So it's slightly proud of the gravel, it does catch a bit there, but it closes like that, slams on that post. 2 hinges over there. Nice, cheap, solid door. It's simply got 2 verticals of the same material, and then I put an angled one on here just to keep it true and square and straight so that it stays in the right position. If you're doing it DIY by yourself, you'll need some sort of way of holding the slats at the correct sort of height as you're fixing them if you're starting at the top going down. But just so you see, I'm just using some Irwin clamps. So I'm just clamping the timber in place in a few places with my little 9mm spacers to get me going. Quick progress update. So here we go, the cladding's coming on. This is probably where I'm going to stop, because after this we'll have a door. Yeah, I'm just balancing it on these, having to cut out some of the steps. Any cut ends are obviously getting treated. I'm using clamp, Irwin clamp with a 9mm spacer. So that's sort of positioning that end. And then at the other end as I work across, I put in another 9mm spacer, lift the timber, nail it in, and then I'll use a little punch just to sink that head a bit deeper. So here, this is the door. I'm just going to clad this area here. As the door opens, obviously you can't put your cladding on the other side, it's perfectly flush, but you
You can't put your cladding in like this because obviously the door won't open, it will hit that and you can't open the door. So I'm just going to, well, I'm going to do them at a 45-degree mitre and position them all in line with that hinge. And that way, it will still be able to open far enough all the way around, and you'll still get the continuity of this sort of horizontal as you're looking at the garden. I think that'll look all right. We'll crack on cutting a load of these. Okay, so the first side of our deck cladding is now complete. So there we go. So it's clad in 50 by 25mm timber slats. It's got that little door tucked in there. And then I've been sorting out underneath here. I've got roof boxes and timber and sledges, all sorts of things tucked away. I've made that a bit neater. I've also got a cement mixer tucked away. There's that little door. So in there, that's all the kids' toys. I don't know if you'll be able to see under here, but there's wood, there's all sorts of stuff, roof boxes. And on this side, you've obviously got the slide, and then underneath there's a cement mixer tucked away. There's a big pile of timber, there's insulation, there's all sorts. So it's really useful storage space, and it'll just get a bit neater once we finish cladding it.